Hi, I'm Jim Shaw, publisher of the Colonial Times Magazine here in Lexington and vice chair of the LexMedia Board of Directors. I'm pleased to be here today to moderate a discussion concerning the proposed debt exclusion election that's scheduled to take place on December 4th. Joining me here today is Nicola Rinaldi, who is co-chair of the Yes for Lexington campaign, and Patrick Mayer, who is chair of the Committee for Financial Responsibility in Lexington. We're here today to discuss the pros and cons of the passing of the debt exclusion, and that's why we've invited Nicola and Patrick to have a sort of a discussion about the pros and cons, the merits, and the concerns about what happens with the debt exclusion. We'll start tonight with, I've asked them both, and they both have agreed to sort of a brief opening statement, but let me reinforce the idea that this is not a debate, this is more of a discussion. So with that, I'll ask Nicola to tell me a little bit about why it's so important for Lexington to pass this debt exclusion.
I'd be happy to. So we have 3 projects that are up for debt exclusion, and what that means is basically the town is voting on whether to fund the projects through an amount over and above the normal 2.5% that our taxes are allowed to increase. And it's called excluded debt because it's not subject to the constraints of the Proposition 2.5. The 3 projects that are in question are the Mariah Hastings Elementary School, which was built in 1955. It's had numerous problems over the years. The beams in the gym have cracked. I was just speaking with Principal Lipsitz the other day. She said that when they were cracked, you could actually see through the beams. Mm-hmm. The modulars that house the 3rd grade and a lot of the learning resources were handed down to us from another school in the late 1990s. So those are over 20 years old and really in rough shape, and they stink. We had some people come for a tour last night, and one of the comments was the mildew is horrific. Excellent resources, F for facilities. So I think that everybody here agrees that on the needs for replacing Hastings. The second project is the fire station. So this is something that I wasn't really aware of. I know people have been talking about it for many years. It was built in the 1940s. It was first recommended for replacement in 1993, which is over 25 years ago, and has consistently been studied. And in fact, in 2012, the architectural firm that studied it found that the structure was so bad they had to put supports into the basement to support the fire station. So I'm sure you've probably seen the pictures in our promo materials and on social media, but they have cribbing underneath the bay of the fire station that supports our $1 million fire trucks. And what I didn't realize until the tours yesterday was it's not just one place that's supported. There are multiple sections that have to be supported. There aren't adequate training facilities. The firefighters work out in the garage and right next to the fire engines, and they're exposed to the exhaust, and their fire gear is right there, and it's just not very, it's not a great situation for the firefighters. They have what was supposed to be a temporary trailer out back that's been there for 10 years now. That's the fire prevention office. So the fire station was built for something like 600 calls per year, and we now have around 3,600 calls per year. And just the fire services that they provide have expanded from just just fighting fires to emergency medical services and hazard prevention. So there's a whole lot more that goes on there now than used to. Okay.
And the children's place?
So the Lexington Children's Place, I think, is the issue that people sort of have the most questions about, because it's what's called an integrated preschool. It is state mandated that every child is educated with a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. So what that means is that for children with special needs, from birth to 3, they can get services from the state. So this is early intervention services, which include speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and so that those specialists will actually come to your home or to your child's school if they're in daycare and service your children there. What happens after that is that those children will enter the town preschool. The town preschool services. It has 75 kids in it at the moment. Some go morning, some go afternoon, some go to both. That's why you might hear talk about slots versus children, and that's the reason for it. And so the least restrictive environment means that we have the special needs children are integrated with typically developing children. So in a typical classroom, there are 15 students, 7 with special needs and 8 typically developing. And that helps us so much going forward because the students are integrated from the beginning. They get used to being with children of varied abilities, and that proceeds into the elementary school. So the big goal is to provide services when the children are young to hope to make them as able as possible to access the normal elementary curriculum. So the Lexington Children's Place was started in the mid-1990s. So it's been we've had it for about 20 years, and it's been in a number of different locations. For a while it was at the high school, then it was at another school I'm not remembering now, and then it moved to Harrington. But the space at Harrington has been very fluid. Even just 2 years ago when my son was there, they had an occupational therapy room that was sort of in the main wing of Harrington, and then Harrington needed the space, so they had to move that out. And then more kids came to the preschool, and they had to move. There was no space for them. So rather than send them out of district, they looked around and said, okay, what are our options here? And they decided to move into the old Harrington building, which was decommissioned as a school in 2005. Right. So we have our youngest, most vulnerable students in a building that we said our elementary student wasn't good for elementary students anymore. It has no sprinkler system. It has a number of other problems. Same as the fire station in Hastings. They're all built in the same era. And so I really think that it's really important that people appreciate why we need this facility.
Right. Well, thank you. And we'll be able to get back to all of these points.
Great.
I want to turn to Patrick Mayer and ask you to do the same. Your sort of general view about why it's important that people take a hard look at the cost and how we're generating the revenue, whether or not the way we're generating the revenue is necessary, as we've discussed. So there you go. Let us know about what you're thinking here.
Thank you, Jim. First of all, thank you for being here. Thank you to you, Nicola. We were here 18 months ago, so we're gaining a lot of experience doing this.
Yes.
As I think I said last year, I'd be happy to have this conversation every week or every month if it can help improve things in town, so I'm delighted to be here. Thank you to LexMedia for organizing this as well, and I certainly hope that viewers will get informed by listening to what we have to say. Thank you, Nicola, for reminding us of what the issues are at the 3 buildings. I think voters need to understand that the question on the ballot on Monday, December 4th is not, do you want these 3 projects to be done? That is not the question. If that was the question, until yesterday, I would have answered yes, yes, and yes, because, by the way, the viewers should know that they will have 3 questions to answer.
Yes.
I would have said yes, we need a new Hastings for all the reasons Nicola explained very cogently. I would have said yes to the fire station because, in fact, I looked at this well before you. When I joined town meeting in 2001, those supporting wooden blocks were all over the basement, and every year we would have the TMMA bus tour, and it would be a disaster.
Yeah.
So the real question to me is, why have our town leaders waited until 2017 to even propose a way to deal with this issue?
I
So
can explain
certainly,
that.
Certainly, yes, we need a new fire station. I believed we also need a new LCP, Lexington Children's Place, until I read yesterday in the Lexington Minuteman the column by Mark Anderson, who basically tells us that the cost per student, the capital cost per student, is an order of magnitude higher than what he has calculated the cost per student is for our Metco students in Lexington, which cost the school say is basically 0. So I'm confused being a math person. So, but that's not again the question on the ballot. The other question that's not on the ballot is it wise to spend $85.7 million of taxpayers' money on these projects? If that was the question, I would also answer yes, yes, and yes. Why? Because I'm convinced that we have very good design teams. We hire the best architects. We have a wonderful PBC, Permanent Building Committee, and so forth and so on. So certainly we've looked at that in a very optimal way. By the way, the other reason why I'm not sure I would vote yes were the question, should we put an LCP on Pelham Road at the old Armenian sister site that we purchased, by the way, out of the tax levy for a number of millions of dollars recently without asking the voters. The reason I'm not sure I would want to build that there is that I'm not sure we have space for a 7th elementary school should we need one. And it seems to me, even though I'm not an expert on all these matters, that it's a lot easier to find a space for 75 kids than it is to find a site in town for a full new elementary school. So, having said what the question is not on December 4th, I want viewers to be very clear. The question is, shall the town be allowed to exempt, and I want you to focus on the word exempt, the debt for these projects from the limits on tax increases that Proposition 2.5 sets for every city and town in Massachusetts. What that means is that if voters say yes, taxes will increase. Why? Because the amount of debt service, which is about, in round numbers, $6 million a year, will be charged to all of us taxpayers in such a way that our taxes will increase by about 3% a year. Okay? Now, if voters say no, what voters are saying is, you can do whatever you want in terms of building or not these things, in terms of spending $85 million or $185 million for that matter, but it's your problem to do that within the constraints of Proposition 2.5. And the reason I'm sitting here saying that my answers will be no, no, and no, even though I want the projects built, is that I know that the town can save money in a creative way under 3 dimensions, which I will explain if asked today, to save $6.5 million a year, which is more than enough to pay that debt service without raising taxes by 3%.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out as we go into our general discussion that there is a difference, difference between a debt exclusion and an override, and I think you touched on it. Basically, it's got one to do with the debt exclusion is just that. We're voting to exclude the town from
the debt service.
The debt service from being limited to 2.5%.
Perhaps we should explain that to the voters the way it works. Every December, the selectmen hold what's called a tax, what's the next word, setting hearing or tax something hearing, where they decide the tax rate. And the way they decide the tax rate is they look at how many dollars were collected the previous year. And if my memory serves me right, it's about $120 million. To that, you add 2.5%, Prop 2.5, and
up to 2.5%.
Very good, Jim. That raises another issue we should discuss today, which is the capital mitigation fund, the capital stabilization fund, sorry, the $28 million that are sitting there. And once the selectmen have done that, and have added what's called new growth, every new house that's built that's worth than the old house, or if I add a porch to my house, all of a sudden my house is worth a little bit more, the town is allowed, under Prop 2.5, to tax me on those additions. That's called the new growth.
Yes.
So the 120 million increases by 2.5%, plus typically it's about $3 million. So you end up with, I don't have my calculator here, but let's say $125 million.
It's actually more like $215 million for the total budget.
Yes, but the tax levy is much less than that because we get state aid and all sorts of fees and, et cetera. So the tax levy, I remember in about FY21 will be about 190 million. So I think now it's 120 plus or minus 10 or 20. But anyway, I'm explaining the mechanism. So if these 3 questions pass, what the town is allowed to do next, whichever December is the appropriate, December in the timeline, instead of charging us collectively 125 million in taxes, it will be 125 plus 6.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's quite all right.
So just to answer your question, the difference between an override and a debt exclusion is that an override allows you to go over that 2.5% in perpetuity, whereas a debt exclusion is only for the life of the loan. So for these projects, it's a 30-year loan. So
and it's mostly based on borrowing?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly, Nikolai. Let's be very clear. I said 6 million because that's basically the debt service in the first years of the 30 years. But if you and I lived long enough to be here in 30 years and those projects were done, in the 31st year, that 6 million, which by the way does decline over time, would go to 0.
It's a principle.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. I went on the Yes website and I noticed that there is we talk about increases starting in 2021 and then going up in 2023
2024 is the
2024,
maximum year.
and that's the maximum year, then it starts to come back down again.
And
Talk a little bit about that.
Okay, I'd love to. So to be clear, the way that the town presents the numbers is based on the value of a median household, which for this fiscal year is $831,000. So for assessment, yes. So as somebody with a house of that value is paying about $12,000 a year in taxes at the moment. So Patrick, you brought up the Capital Stabilization Fund, which is great. That's money that the town has saved over the past 5 years that can be used to offset
Give 1 second, just try to finish your point.
that can be used to offset the increase in tax payments from these 3 projects. So that's going to be used in the first few years. The debt payments are highest at the beginning because the loans that the town takes out are variable principal, constant interest. So you start by paying a lot more at the beginning, and then it decreases over time as you pay down them. I think is that right?
I think so.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think people will understand that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So the capital, because the payments are biggest in the first 5 years of the loan, the Capital Stabilization Fund will be used to reduce that, which is one of the reasons that, there are 2 reasons that we don't see tax increases for a few years. One is that the construction is not starting right away, and the second is that we're using that Capital Stabilization Fund. So
just a word about
go ahead.
the Capital Stabilization Fund. I think viewers need to understand exactly what that is. That's a fund of $28 million as we speak, and I don't agree with Nicola on the term the town saved money. The reason those $28 million are there are twofold. First of all, the town of Lexington joined what's called the Group Insurance Commission, which is a state program to provide health plan coverages for employees some time ago. And it's called the GIC for short. And everybody knew that GIC rates are much lower for similar plans than the old types of health plans that Lexington offered to its employees. So that was a saving. I will note, though, that some of us around this table suggested that Lexington should have joined GIC immediately after Brookline did, and unfortunately that didn't happen. So that generated a number of millions of dollars of savings a year. But, and that's the second point which is critical, what happened at the December tax setting meetings year after year since we had those savings is that the selectmen continued to tax the residents at what's called the tax levy limit, that $120 or $125 million I talked about. Whereas they could very well have said, oh, we're saving, let's say, $4 million this year because of GIC. Instead of 125, I'm going to collect only 121. They did not do that. The result is that we have $28 million of taxpayers' money that are sitting in a fund that frankly pays less than if it sat in my bank account. So that's fine. At least the money will not be lost. I have no concern that it will disappear in any way, shape, or form. All I'm saying is that saying it's money the town has saved is frankly not the reality.
Well, I think it's money. I think it is money. I must to some degree disagree with Patrick because I think some time ago, Selectman Cohen recognized he was a bond counsel for years. He was general counsel in Lexington before he joined the Board of Selectmen. And I know he recognized the need, in order to keep the AAA bond rating, that the town was required to have a stabilization fund that was funded to a certain degree.
That's another $9 million.
Right.
I didn't talk about that.
Okay,
there are 2 funds.
Dr. Tchaikovsky did analysis, and they found that the schools had put about $23.3 million into this fund.
That's another story.
So
Okay.
That's another story. What I'm saying is,
I agree.
This is important. This is important.
Quickly.
We have 2 funds. One is called the Stabilization Fund, which every city and town in Massachusetts has, and we have $9 million there, and that's great. And that is what helps us with the AAA
that's
bond
not the
rate.
capital.
But then we have this new fund, which did not exist, let's say, 6 years ago.
2012.
It basically was created as soon as the GIC savings started existing. It's just as simple as that. And what I'm saying is, the selectmen since that time had a choice, which was either to continue taxing at the levy limit and to accumulate what's now $28 million, or they could have taxed us less and not have the $28 million.
Well,
it's
so
just as simple
one
as
of
that.
the problems is that one of the ongoing concerns that is raised is the town hasn't been planning well enough. The town hasn't been planning. The town hasn't been planning this. The town hasn't looked at the preschool, the town, it's a constant refrain. And yet here they are, they have been planning, they've been saving this money in the Capital Stabilization Fund, knowing that many of these projects need to happen. Because the reason that we have so many school buildings that need to be fixed right now is based on the way the state used to fund school construction. So up until the early 2000s, the state would just pay for new buildings. So the way that the capital projects used to work is you build a school with a 30 to 40 year lifespan. At the end of that lifespan, the state would pay for a new school. And that stopped in the early 2000s. And so now we have all these schools that were built in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and other town buildings as well. We can't forget about the police station. And
now you have to go hand in hand to the School Building Assistance Board, and hopefully that they'll have the funding. They don't automatically do it. You now have to apply for these funds.
Correct.
And there's a whole new process.
Correct.
And I think they also look to see how healthy the town is before they'll partner up with a certain community. So I think there is some merit to actually saving. But
but in terms of planning,
Right.
I have to remember here fondly my now unfortunately deceased and mentor in town meeting, Ephraim Weiss, would stand up at town meeting year after year after year after year and say, where is the budget to maintain our buildings? And there was none for a while. Now there is some with our facilities
I don't
department.
think it's fair to keep bringing up things that happened decades ago.
If I may finish, this is relevant to the fire station. The reason we have a fire station that's standing on wooden blocks and that is totally antiquated and that we should have replaced 15 years ago, if not longer, in my view, is that we do not have long-term planning in this town. In fact, I challenge you, Nicola, to show me what our budget would look like in 10 or 15 years, our operating budget, if instead of 7,200 kids in the schools, we had 9,200. Do you have any such document?
Well, I think that you're looking for conjecture at this point.
Yes, exactly.
And
I would like to address the fire station question. The reason that the fire station hasn't been built until now is that there was no swing space. You need to have a place to have the fire station in the interim while you're rebuilding the current fire station. And that property was purchased a year or two ago, the Liberty Mutual property on Bedford Street, and there were many criteria that needed to be met in order to have have that swing space. It had to be, the fire station response time is required to be 4 minutes to anywhere in town.
Right.
So that really limits where you can look for a swing space. So that's the reason why we're looking to do the fire station now, is that we finally have that swing space available.
Right.
And it wasn't there 5 years ago.
Let me just sort of back up just a second, so people, as we go further into this discussion, people should know that the three points we're discussing, the three questions, and this is an unbundled question, so people will have the chance to vote individually on these three issues. One is the funding for the firehouse, and I believe that's question 3. The first question is the funding for Mariah Hastings Elementary School, and the second question, I think, which is the most controversial as far as the public is concerned in terms of the funding and whether or not it's necessary, is question 2, and that's the children's place. And that's kind of here what we're talking about. I want to be able to couch this discussion instead of sort of getting off to planning from 20 years from now and going back too far or whatever. I just want to make sure that we're sort of focused on these three issues, because really that's what we're obligated to do here. We just want to get people understanding what the impact is. I'm going to go back to Patrick, because Patrick, you talked about the ability to do this without a debt exclusion. And I went to your website as well, and I point to the 3 major points. And I think you even said hoped you had a chance to talk about that. And that's the optimization of the school capacity, how to save on town health costs, and METCO. And I do have a couple of things I want to mention to it, particularly on the health costs and the GIC. But why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about how you propose to do it without the debt exclusion?
Well, basically, there are 3 areas where the town could save. Number 1 is how we assign students in our elementary schools. In the old days, when enrollments were much lower than they are now, each child was fortunate and could attend his or her neighborhood school. Unfortunately, our enrollments have been basically growing very fast, and this is no longer possible. There is no way that by chance, what house on what street new children to town will be can match the particular capacity and number of classrooms available in that particular neighborhood school. So fortunately, the school committee in December of 2016 voted a new policy whereby a child who is new to town, who just moved in, shall no longer be guaranteed his or her elementary neighborhood school. Now, we also have a policy which says that the maximum number of kids in a classroom is a certain number. If my memory serves me right, in kindergarten it's 20, and then in grades, I believe 2 to 5, it's 26. Now, there's a reason for that. I would prefer that those numbers be 16 or 17. The reason they're not 16 or 17 is that evidently, the fewer kids we have in a classroom, the more expensive it is to run the system, and there's only a limit to what taxpayers can afford. And if we could educate again kids with one teacher for 17 max, that would be wonderful. As we all know, when California was in dire financial straits, there were 35 to 45 kids per classroom. And
so you're proposing that Lexington should reconsider.
What I'm saying is that if we had applied the policy that says that every new kid in town can be placed in any classroom in the system,
I'm not sure that's accurate, but
Okay.
well, you're welcome to check my numbers. Mary, our superintendent, did, and she has no objection to my numbers. Okay, she has other objections.
She's not here to defend, so we don't want to put words in her mouth.
That's right. But I could cite her email to me saying that she has no objection to my numbers. She has other objections, which we should debate, and I have asked her to please schedule a meeting so we can start that discussion. But back to the issue at hand here. If we had moved the incoming kids to those classrooms that still had room up to that 20 to 26, all we needed to, let me recapitulate here. We now operate with 146 classrooms across our 6 elementary schools, 146. If we had sent the new kids to the right classrooms, and if we had asked 10 existing kids to move from one school building to another, instead of 146 classrooms, we could operate with 130. That's 16 classrooms, which is worth, in round numbers, $2 million in savings per year.
Can I ask you quickly,
Yes.
when you say right classroom, what do you mean by the right classroom?
A classroom that had only 24 kids, instead of running at 24, we would put one more kid and be at 25, which is still under 26. That's what I mean.
Okay.
Well, your spreadsheet shows most classrooms going to the maximum, which is 26. So
system-wide, we would increase the average class size by 2.7 kids. And I have a spreadsheet here, and I could, if you ask me what grade and what building, I can tell you exactly by how much. Obviously, if we have 130 classrooms instead of 146, for the same 3,153 kids, evidently the average class size will increase. But there's no free lunch.
Patrick, before we go, because I want to let you respond to the class size issue, but I want to make sure we stay with this thing, because now you talk about, so you're talking about savings by increasing. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I have one quick question.
Sure.
So you say $2 million. How do you get to that number from 16 classrooms?
Because a teacher in round numbers is $100,000, plus you need to heat the classroom, you need to clean it, you need supplies, you need all sorts of things, the details of which I'd be more than happy. The point is, it's not 1 million.
You're rounding up. You're rounding up. But I will.
If you have a better number, Nicola, I'd be delighted to use it.
I've
been advocating this for about 5 years. I've never heard from the school committee any firmer number.
Patrick, so, she brings up a good point, because I'm asking you to talk about where these funds come from, and I want to make sure that if you're saying we're going to generate $2 million from that it's actually a real number, not just sort of based on what you might think. Obviously there are savings to be had by reducing the number of teachers and all of that, but when you're talking about paper towels and other things.
The main thing is teachers, of course.
But I want to make sure that we're being fair here and where these numbers are coming from.
The main thing is teachers.
Okay.
Now there are all sorts of
1.6 million for teachers and 400,000 for additional costs. Is that
something of that order? Indeed.
You're not
again, I welcome.
You're suggesting that's what he's saying.
I'm saying that's what he's saying. Yes, okay. I just want to be clear on.
And what I'm also saying
here
is that there are all sorts of things to study, but this could be done immediately, except for the 10 kids. Okay. Under our policies, and the things to be studied would be things such as. The superintendent tells me, oh, but what about the quality of education? If we have 2.7 more kids per classroom, of course, it'll be less good than today. And I agree, of course. But my response to that is we have SPED kids, some of whom spend maybe only 30% of their time in the classroom. And those are counted in the 3,153. So my question, I sent her an email this morning, in fact. I would like to see how many SPED kids do we have out of the 3,153. How many spend, less than 10% of their time, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, etc., so that we can analyze this, so we can talk about reality.
But we're
not
getting
just,
into the minutia, though, there, aren't we, really?
But, if you want to
So-
save money, you have to get into minutia. Money doesn't fall off the trees.
Yes,
Might I
go ahead,
respond?
because then I want to
Okay,
get
so
back to the other 2 points
Yes,
that
and
he's going to make. Go ahead.
So I think it's very important to note that the school assignment process is way more complicated than just moving numbers around on a spreadsheet. It's very easy to do that. And I'm a numbers person too, Patrick. I have a PhD in computational biology. I love working with data and spreadsheets. So I've looked at your spreadsheets very carefully, and even the new one you put out yesterday. So there are a number of costs that you're not taking into account. We have defined bus routes that are in the neighborhoods now, and there was a redistricting last year that actually moved a couple of neighborhoods from my neighborhood, for example, new students coming in no longer go to Hastings, they go to Estabrook. The Avalons used to go to Bridge and Bowman, new students moving in there now go to Hastings. So each of those neighborhoods now has 2 buses. But your proposal would move kids from Estabrook to Fisk, and Estabrook to Harrington, and Bowman to Harrington, and Bowman to Fisk, and it's at every different grade level. So I looked at your numbers, and you have 7 of the kids that you say would need to move, 78 of them would require additional transportation beyond what's already provided. So that's a cost that you're not taking into account.
Correct.
Okay, you have 59 open spots. As your spreadsheet shows, 59 open spots.
I don't know what you're referring to. But that's okay. Let's
If
not
you-
bore the
if you-
viewers
No.
with
I
details.
think
Okay.
it's important
Yeah.
to go into details
Okay,
because
sure.
you're saying we could save $2 million. I want people to be very clear that this is not a guaranteed
Do
savings
you think we
at
can?
all.
Let me ask
At
you
all.
this, Nicola.
So, no,
do you
let
think
me-
we
let
can
me-
save anything?
We might be able to save a few dollars,
Okay,
but it's
so who's
no,
working
excuse
on
But
me.
yes,
Who's
but
working
that,
on it?
hold on,
Finish
hold
my
on.
point
But
yet.
that's based upon
I haven't finished my point.
upon reducing teachers who are under contract in the middle of the year. I think maybe.
No, not in the middle of the year.
Well, I'm
For the
thinking
You're
of
saying we
school
could do
year.
it right now.
It may be a
we
little bit
hire about 50
unrealistic.
teachers each year, Jim.
Okay.
So instead of hiring 50, we would hire
All right.
34.
All right, please
So
go
nobody
ahead.
would get fired.
Yeah, please continue.
So when I was talking about open spots, you're saying you put every classroom to its maximum. So with the numbers you have in your spreadsheet, there were 59 open spaces in the whole elementary
I
level.
mean, compared with maximum.
Compared with maximum,
So
yes.
not all classrooms
Yes.
are at maximum, is what you're
Correct.
telling me.
Not
Okay.
every class in your plan is at maximum
Okay.
at this point.
Now I understand you're 59. I never computed it. Fine.
Last year we had 95 additional elementary students.
Yes.
So that's 30 students over your maximum.
So you need to spend
When
money on
you-
over max
So
age,
for
of course.
every one of those for those additional children that come, and that's assuming that the children that arrive fill those 59 spots, that they're in the correct grades. So
Well,
you
which
can't.
they could be because
They
they're
could
by
be, but they also
definition new
could
to
not
town.
be. They could,
They're by definition
there's-
new
they
to
could
town.
be a 4th grader. They could be a 5th grader, and you don't know. So,
Okay.
but
We're
so
getting
I'll give you
far
So
into
what's
the
the
weeds
point?
here. I just want to make sure people understand.
I want people to understand that this $2 million savings is completely theoretical. So you have the costs of overmax aids.
So you think it's zero?
And there are.
You think the saving is
I
zero?
did not say that.
So what do
I
you
did
think
not
the
say
saving
that.
is?
I don't know, because you can't.
So then what should we do?
Well,
We should exclude the debt, is what we should do.
But wait, what does that have to do with saving, even if it's $100,000, not $2 million?
You can't
as
pay
you're
for
trying to
you
convince
can't
me?
pay for these projects with $100,000.
but this is
No,
based
but
on
you're
but
changing the
this is based
conversation
upon
here.
no.
You're-
It's-
you're
no,
changing
hold
the
on,
conversation.
hold on, please. This is based on your argument that we don't need the debt exclusion because we can fund it from here, but there's no way to guarantee a full $2 million savings from there. I do want to go on and talk about the other 2 ways that you propose to
Sure.
save money, and this is something you
But to
asked to do
finish,
earlier.
if I may, I mean,
very
Nicola
quickly,
has been speaking for quite a while.
very quickly.
Nicola is trying to tell us that the $2 million are not real. And I'm telling her, and I'm telling the public, nobody has studied this proposal seriously. All I hear are words. Oh, but there's this problem, there's that problem, etc.
Right.
We've had 2 working groups, one on enrollments, managed by Selectman Joe Pado, and more recently one on the residential exemption, also managed by Selectman Joe Pado. If Nicola, the system, really wanted to save some money, it should form a working group. I would be happy to serve. And if you can show me with numbers that this is not real, I'll be happy to be convinced. But I can tell you, I've spent a lot of time on this. Everything I hear from the yes side are words. not numbers.
I
Is
just
this
gave
problem?
you a whole bunch of
She
numbers.
did give you numbers,
No,
but let me just say, no, let me stop
I
there.
repeat here,
No.
the savings, to the best of my calculation here, are $2 million a year.
All right, hold on.
Until proven otherwise.
I just want to say very quickly that a few minutes ago you agreed that was kind of a loose figure because you came to it by basically saying there's going to be so much savings in salary and then heating and this, but so it's really not a proven number. On the other hand, he makes a point that, can you say how much is going to be saved? And you say, so let's agree that we know that there's some savings to be had, but at what cost? And I think that's what it comes down to. And I think I don't want to be using sort of numbers that were kind of, and I know, and with all due respect to you, Patrick, I know you work hard on the numbers and you firmly believe that this is the case, but it is, I think it's unreasonable to say that it's a hard $2 million.
Well, I think voters should remember that Nicola's closing words 18 months ago, when another debt exclusion was in front of us, was, let's pass the debt exclusion, and then I will, and I quote you, personally look into these issues to save money. And, I haven't received a single phone call from you, Nicola, in 18 months. So if you have done any work on this, I don't understand why you haven't let me know.
Let's speak to that.
So
and
have
then
you?
I want to move along.
Have you?
I went to a number of meetings for the Selectmen's Tax Deferral Committee. I didn't join because I got a new job and with 3 kids and being Hastings PTO president, and I didn't have the time anymore. I have attended a number of school committee meetings. I would put the same question to you. You have stated for many years that you believe in all of this, but you haven't attended a single school committee meeting. You haven't attended Board of Selectmen meetings. So let's not make this personal. It's not about you and me. Right. It's about the numbers and the projects.
I want to get back to it because I just wanted a chance for you to rebut. That's all, because it really is not personal.
Could I make one more set of points about this $2 million? Of
course.
So there are a number of other factors that are not being taken into account in your spreadsheet. Which again, I love numbers. Your spreadsheet looks great, but we have. What do you do with people who move into town who live right next to the school? Right next to a school, and most of the spaces that are left in your...
Let's have a working group and look at all of this.
Let her finish.
These are excellent
they're
questions.
walkers.
Yeah, let her finish.
You're going to send walkers across town. We have kids who are English language learners. Those kids have the additional teachers, so there's the ratio of 30 students to 1 English language teacher. So that's not being taken into account. If you send kids to a given school, then you might need an additional English language learner. 22% of the children that arrive are English language learners. Special education, each school has a different special education focus. And so a child that moves in might not necessarily be able to go to any school. The question of siblings. The school committee has committed to keeping siblings together.
So have I.
So but your spreadsheet, how can you know when a child moves in, you're saying, well, this 4th grader has to go to Bridge. What about the sibling? If the bridge is already full, then it's so much more complicated.
Well, that's why we need a working group.
Patrick, hold on. Finish what you're saying, and I'll let you speak to that, and then we're going to move on to another point.
So my overall point here is that the school assignment process is so complicated. There's no possible way that you're going to save anywhere near $2 million. And to say that we should not fund the debt exclusion, we should vote no because of these theoretical savings, it just doesn't make sense.
Okay, make your point.
I would believe this, Nicola, if we had a working group in which I or people who believe in the $2 million were invited to participate. We haven't had that. It's very easy to be, frankly, what I perceive as defensive on your part by listing all these issues which exist. I will make just one numerical point here. 11.6% of our elementary students, that's over 350, are new to town. Okay, so that gives us a lot of flexibility with respect to language learners, etc. All of this needs to be worked on. You said 18 months ago you would learn, perhaps, even if it's not you personally. The point is there has been no committee in town. Is it true? Has there been?
But no, that's not the point. That's not what.
Has there been any study of this proposal done formally in town? The answer is no, notwithstanding what we hear from your campaign, which says it has been looked into and it's ridiculous.
It could very well have been looked into this, but we're not here to debate whether or not something that was said
But I
15
think
months
viewers
ago.
should know that there has been no analysis by our leaders of this proposal, and therefore they should not increase our taxes by 3% simply because they don't study tax-saving measures.
Okay, point well made. Okay, we've been doing this about 35 minutes so far, and I'm feeling that we really haven't gotten to the real sort of macro issues. You know, we're getting into the weeds, into the micro, and I'm in between two people who understand numbers. I'm afraid most of the viewers aren't as attuned to the numbers as you guys are. So I really want to talk in concepts about what's important here. People are passionate. I know the firefighters are out there and they're talking up a new fire station. The conditions for them have been deplorable. Even the safety issues for them, when we talk about our first responders, and we've been hearing a lot about first responders in sort of as a part of lots of debates, whether or not we stand at sporting events or take a knee. We always talk about our military, our first responders, yet here we are, so many years later, with a substandard situation for them. So I know I'm editorializing and I need to be careful because I'm moderating. So, and I know that you even have knowledge that, that it probably does need to be looked at. And I know your issues are more about the funding mechanisms. Which
is the only question on the ballot.
Right, and that is the question on the ballot. So what I want to get to is, we've got three questions. The Mariah Hastings. So let's talk about it, while we have just a few minutes left, let's talk about each one. Let's start with Mariah Hastings School. Because we talked about the whole concept of budgets and town-wide and all this, but the people aren't voting on town-wide budgets, they're voting on Mariah Hastings School. I'm going to ask you first. Why is it so important for us to exclude the debt to do this at Mariah Hastings?
Well, I think it's very important that we exclude the debt to allow us to move forward with these projects. The special town meeting voted that these projects are contingent upon the debt exclusion passing. So if the debt exclusion does not pass, the projects will likely not continue in the manner that we see them
We're talking
today,
about all three, but let's get to
Yes.
Mariah Hastings, because there is the issue of the $16.5 million that the state has. I know we have 120 days to respond, and I know that time is growing short. And a lot of people are concerned that it's tied into the debt exclusion. There's been some talk about how it really isn't, and what I want you to speak to is the necessity for excluding the debt to take care of what we need at Mariah Hastings School. The substandard conditions there, no sprinklers, all of this stuff, and then if you can speak to the money from the School Business Assistance Organization.
So the Massachusetts School Building Authority determined that the Mariah Hastings School was under such a condition that it does need to be replaced, and so they are funding us as they do. It's about 30% of costs that they allow. So it ends up being about $16.5 million that the state will give us to put towards construction of the new Mariah Hastings, which will reduce the cost to about $48 million for the whole school. And I think it's important to note that not only is the school going to help not only are we replacing the school, we're also adding 9 additional classrooms, which gives us a lot more capacity. And it will allow us to relieve some of the overcrowding that currently exists at Bridge and Bowman, particularly. So it's really a part of a town-wide solution for the capacity, for the overcrowding that we have based on the rising enrollment.
And when was the Mariah Hastings School was built in the 1950s?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, 1955.
So it's an aging facility.
Yes.
And we've addressed that. We've traditionally in Lexington addressed these aging facilities through pretty much the same process, going back to Harrington and some of the others.
So Harrington and Fisk.
Okay, but $16.5 million, is it at stake? I mean, I realistically, I know we have a certain period of time to act on it, and the state wants to know that we're moving forward. And I believe in the letter that the School Building Assistance Authority sent forward, it was the time frame was 120 days.
Yes. Yes.
So when you talk about, I saw this on the website, that we could lose $16.5 million, which is really central to the success of that project. Is that a real statement? Is it possible we could lose it, or will we lose it? Likely to lose it?
That's a tough question.
Okay.
So the the 120 days is up on December 23rd. At special
21st.
town meeting,
Okay. Well, we're
21st.
talking about a couple of days, but so what? It's
at the
got it.
special town meeting on October 16th, it was made very clear to the town meeting members that the contingent clause was in there, so that if the debt exclusion does not pass, the building project will not move forward, because the town finance committees, the selectmen, everybody involved has spent thousands of hours studying these questions and the best way to fund this and the best projects to do. I've attended and watched many school committee meetings where they've gone back and forth about the different parts of the project, and it was made very clear to town meeting members that the funding would be the project continuing would be contingent on the debt exclusion passing.
Right.
So if the debt exclusion doesn't pass, the town, my understanding is that the selectmen will try everything they can to get that extended.
But it's reasonable
But
to assume
it's-
that
I mean,
if
there
the
are
town
no
doesn't make a commitment to doing this, whether it be through the debt exclusion, they're not prepared then to turn around and spend the additional money. The state will see this and could withdraw after 120 days, because there are school needs throughout the entire Commonwealth.
Yes.
And we're just basically sending a message to the School Building Assistance Authority: thank you, but no thank you. That's at least my take on it. So it's not that it absolutely go away, but there's this very strong likelihood it would go away. Okay, let me talk to you about that.
Well, I think the question is not complicated. It's very clear and simple. And I'm disturbed that I received in the mail from the Yes campaign this Monday a note that says, this came to my house, by the way. It says, if the referendum fails, we receive no, in capital italics, state funding, those 16.5 million. That's simply not true. Okay? First of all, the school committee wanted the funding to not be contingent on passage
true,
of
yes.
the debt exclusion. Okay? Second,
Nobody made a motion to make that
Second-
change at the special town meeting.
well,
however,
since I've left town meeting, very few people make any kinds of motions at town meeting. Okay?
okay.
So I presented this chart to the selectmen on Monday, which shows them that they still have 2 weeks to call a special town meeting before the 120 days, which happens to be December 21st. Okay? I did that in the public comments, where a citizen has 3 minutes to speak, and well, they don't respond. So from my perspective, and from the perspective of all the voters who will vote no, as they should, if the selectmen do not call a special town meeting, whose job it would be to basically appropriate the funds for the Maria Hastings School, not contingent on passage of the debt exclusion, and if the debt exclusion, if that first question fails, the only people to blame are not the voters, as you're trying to do by writing this in your mailings, but it will be the selectmen. Why? Because they will simply have gambled on a yes answer.
No,
Let
me speak.
That's my point of view.
I know, and you're welcome to your point of view. Absolutely, that's why you're here. But I think that's a little unfair, because I don't think anybody's basing any future policy on the outcome. I think and I think it's unreasonable to assume, your position basically is based on the fact that they could, within 2 weeks, come back and hold a special town meeting in the middle of the holiday season. I think that may be unreasonable.
This is,
So,
look, the dates
Patrick,
are here.
you also had sent us an email.
My point is
saying
there's no plan B.
could-
Why is there no plan B from the selectmen?
Well, I don't, because, oftentimes there are no plan Bs.
Well, here there is. You call a special town meeting.
Well, no,
you could do it
that's
on December 7, 14, or 21st.
That's a theoretical plan B. That you're saying it can happen.
Not at all.
But
Not at all. It takes, I've checked with the town clerk, it takes 10 days to get the one-page warrant to the post office,
Right.
and then there's 14 days of deadline that's necessary, and this is what I'm computing here. There's
Right.
still 3 weeks for the selectmen
Okay.
to call a
But I
special
think-
town meeting
I
and
think-
have a plan B.
I think we've
and they don't have
established-
one.
I think
That's their
we've
problem,
established-
not voters who think
No.
that they don't want to have a 3% tax increase.
I agree, but I think we've established that, that there is a legitimate concern about the state money going away. Is it absolute? I think we can say no, it's not absolute. I think they've revised.
Contrary to what the Yes campaign writes.
I think they've revised their statement, however.
I hope they'll keep me on their mailings so I
I
can
think the
enjoy the
statement has
revised
been revised
language.
based on what I've seen. That it's not an absolute no, but I think it's been revised. I think after you've come to become aware of what can happen, which I think is admirable, by the way. So
It is. I salute it too. Thank you.
Okay, so all right, so we've had this discourse now on the schools. So I'm talking about Mariah Hastings schools. So you're very emphatic about the need to make these changes, the need to actually exclude the debt to get it done. And again, we're kind of stuck over here on the way we generate the revenue. I want to now move to.
We've talked only about a third of generating the revenues. We need 6 million. We've discussed
Right,
the
no.
59 spaces for just
No,
two
no,
of
I-
them.
no, I understand, but
with
I'm-
the other methods as
but
well.
my
So-
concern-
Which
though-
equally haven't been studied, by
We
the
have
way.
limited time. We're already at 50 minutes, which and I can't believe it's been 50 minutes already. Because it's been very spirited, and I think that's a good thing. People can see the passion on both sides.
I just hope
But
the
if I-
viewers have as good a time as we're having here, Jim.
But if we can continue, I know that I wanted to talk about the other two, the GIC and other things, but I really want to get into the what the people will be voting for. And then if you can work in some of the GIC stuff in terms of the costs, because I have some questions as to whether or not we can, because right now, the arbitration, the negotiations we have for contracts are different from the healthcare and the negotiation on healthcare. So to be able to tie the two together as you propose, I think would take a considerable effort.
Well,
But
here is my answer to
well,
this.
but let me. I just try to work it in here. As we're talking about, and I will give you a chance to do that. But I just like, for instance, the next question is Children's Place, and that's one that's going to, and mind you, we've got about 10 minutes left, so we've got to. And if we want closing statements, we've got to keep our comments concise. So on Children's Place, I went to you first last time on the Children's Place. Your concern about the town's commitment, and I know you talked a little bit about it before in terms of the funding mechanism, the fact that the town has already paid $12.5 million, I believe, for the property.
$8 million.
$8 million. Okay. All right. I've read different figures, so I apologize for that. Thanks for the correction. So your comments on the Children's Place?
I'm simply concerned that we don't know whether we won't need that site for something bigger and more critical, such as a 7th elementary school, if our enrollments keep rising. Mm-hmm. And so I'd rather keep the space open. But more importantly, if we really want to build this, we don't need to increase taxes 3%. We can do it within the tax levy limit by saving the money in the way that we say can be saved.
Okay. And you speak to that?
And I note that, for the last 18 months, when we had the exact same debate about the 2% tax increase 18 months ago, no study whatsoever has been done. The only thing I read in the paper yesterday is that our town manager says, oh, it's complicated. Right over here, I negotiate health benefits with all our employees.
Right.
And right here, I have 20-plus unions, including school teachers, etc.
It's a separated negotiation,
Well, that's true. But today, forget about the idea we put forward. Today, obviously, we don't give, or agree to something on health benefits without knowing what we're going to agree on salaries, it seems to me. Right. So whatever magic the town manager works today, I'm saying we should work the same magic to come up with a more creative, a more ambitious proposal, which simply has never been studied.
Okay, but let me ask you.
It's also not guaranteed savings.
Right, no, I agree with you, and this is what I want to ask. Because you talk about the difference if we were to, stop paying 85% of health care for workers, and I'm now sort of jumping into your shoes for a minute, because that's where you proposed some of the savings here, and how we get to beyond the $2 million we already talked about. So if we're talking about reducing the town's contribution to healthcare to 50%, yet raising salaries
by $7,000 for each and every employee,
increase
no
salary.
Questions asked.
Right.
In the scales of salaries forever.
And you're saying that we can still raise. So we're saying that we'll cut back healthcare, give them more money.
On the salary
to
side.
compensate on the salary side.
Everybody will be at least as well off as they are now, and many people will earn in total
propose,
comp
but
more
how
than
do you
today.
propose to do that when we have a separate negotiation for healthcare and a separate negotiation and bringing those two together?
I'll tell you exactly. I propose that we put on hold the healthcare negotiations, and what will happen at the expiration of the current contract, which is June 30th of 2018, our current contract will continue until there's a new one. And meanwhile, the town manager should immediately hire a very expert consulting firm to basically look into what we're proposing.
And what do you propose the savings will be for that?
I'm sorry?
What is the savings? So we're going to go from $2 million and we make this change. How much will the town save?
$2.5 million a year.
And that's
why?
based- yeah.
Let me explain why.
Very
Because
quickly, very
many of our married salaried employees will have an incentive instead of, of taking our benefits to use the benefits from their spouse's employer. Whereas today,
There's
when
a
a
lot of
teacher works in Lexington and her husband works for IBM, and the family takes the Lexington benefits, the Lexington taxpayer is basically subsidizing
But there's
IBM.
a lot of assumption, and that's able
Huge amount
to.
of assumption.
Yeah,
No,
and that's my concern.
that's not true.
Okay, well, no,
This is all based on research that was conducted now 5 years ago. If you look at the subscription rates in each town that has various numbers for this 85%, you find that the lower the 85% down to 50, the fewer employees subscribe.
Are these
Why?
numbers-
Because their spouses have a better plan, and they go to the spouse's employer as they should.
Are these numbers
Jim,
available
may I-
on your website?
Absolutely.
Okay, then
May-
we'll,
may I-
we'll
In great
encourage people,
detail.
and I
May
do want you to speak
really
to
quick,
it.
really quick.
No, go ahead.
So Patrick's plan assumes that 55% of married employees will choose their spouse's health care plan. That is the assumption that is being made in order to get to $2.5 million. If 0% of the employees chose their spouse's plan, the town would be paying an extra $3 million. So we have a swing of $5.5 million. And depending on an individual circumstances, where their spouse is employed, the town could end up anywhere in that range. So
It's
to
a
say
very-
based
it's a-
on a
it's a major
mathematical model,
gamble,
yeah,
right.
it's a huge gamble. To say based on a mathematical model that was done 5 years ago that we should do this and pay an additional $3 million at a minimum. I mean, sorry, I'm getting
Yeah, go
worked
ahead.
up and confused here.
That's okay.
So to say that based on a mathematical model, X number of people will choose their spouse's health care and we will save $2.5 million.
If they behave
is
like
just-
Concord employees behave, indeed.
But these are Lexington employees, not Concord
How are
employees.
Lexington employees different from Concord or Burlington or Wellesley or et
But
cetera
we're not
employees?
debating Concord
But I'm
or
curious,
Bedford or
where does
Wilmington.
Nicola know the numbers she just gave us?
From your website. Well,
Has there been a committee? Has any serious study
No, we keep
been done of
going. We
this?
keep going back to that. But you're putting numbers out. She's obviously looked at them, and she's.
Well, except I think I've spent a little bit more time on this than Nicola did.
Well,
with all due
maybe so,
respect.
but I have to think that there's a certain amount of assumption in everything that's
Oh,
coming
there are many
forward.
assumptions, absolutely.
Right, and
Just
I
like
just-
the moving the kids from
And
one
our-
school to the next.
Right, okay.
My point, though, is the town keeps saying this is not feasible.
Right.
In fact, Peter Enrich, former selectman, called them in writing in the Minuteman pipe dreams that have been extensively studied. First of all,
Okay.
they're not
Well,
pipe dreams.
maybe
And
he said it
second,
in the
I've
Minuteman.
challenged,
He didn't say
I
it here,
challenged
and-
him here to show me where this has been studied.
Okay.
And the
Well,
answer
he's
is
not-
it has not.
He's not here to answer, so I just want
Hopefully he's watching. And maybe he'll call
I
me.
assume he will at some point watch this, and then he can speak to that directly. I want to get in finally to the fire station, and because it's really one of the most emotional things that that's out there. Because again, people, they look fondly to fire. People understand the need for Lexington education. We've come so far over the years. People, they come here, they want to settle here for education. Once they get here, they want to know they're safe. And again, it's one of those things that kind of tugs at your heartstring. You want to do the right thing for the people who are first responders or public safety officials who are putting their life on the line. I know we all feel we owe them something. And I guess the question is, when it comes down to it, just how much do we owe them? Are we willing to go that far? Are we willing to do a debt exclusion? If it comes right down to it, I know, again, you said that if circumstances were different, you would support it if it was a different funding mechanism. So let me go. Who did I go first to?
Well, I
last
think the
time?
question is really for me. How can
Okay.
it be so mean to our firefighters is kind of what you're
I
implying,
guess
right?
I'm not necessarily setting it up that way, but if
No,
you
but I
want
will
to take
say,
it, go ahead.
How can Patrick say no to the firefighters? That's
Well,
basically the question
right,
you're asking.
No,
right?
I think we all know that you say yes. It's just you question the
It's
funding
the question of funding
no.
mechanisms.
First of all, thank you for remembering that I say yes. In
Yes.
fact, as a town meeting member, I wished we had fixed rebuilt the fire station, 20 years ago.
said we
Okay,
didn't have the
we didn't.
space.
Okay, for reasons we've discussed already. What I think, Jim, people should think about is not only the firefighters, who I respect and thank every day for what they do. They put their lives on the line. I know that.
Yes.
But we should also remember the people who are leaving, the residents who have to leave this town because they can't afford the taxes. I happen to be a Bernie Sanders voter. all right?
Me
And
too.
when my neighbor, great,
Well, we can
so
agree
we
on
can
that.
agree on something.
Yes.
So Nicola, how can you ask people to raise their taxes by 3% when all these things have not been studied? Please
we're
explain it to me.
we're talking about the firehouse. I'm asking you about the firehouse.
I'm saying
I want to stay focused.
Voting yes on question 3 will increase the taxes by, in round numbers, a third of the 3%, so 1%, let's say, okay?
Okay.
And I'm saying this may be what will chase away another 100 people, elderly people on limited
But I
incomes
think
from our
that
town.
if you were to
And
ask
I
whether
don't
the elderly
understand how
want,
I don't understand how another Bernie Sanders voter, Nicola, thank you, can, frankly, ask for a 3% tax increase when the way to save the money we need to do the projects has not been studied.
we're going to close with the 3%. Let's focus on the 1%. In terms of the, 1/3.
Well, my answer is we can do the fire station within the current taxes.
Okay.
We don't need to raise taxes for it.
I get it. Go ahead.
So the town actually has a number of programs in place to help citizens, seniors who are struggling with their taxes. There's a tax deferral program which allows seniors to defer all of their property taxes at a very low interest rate. There's a circuit breaker program through the state. There's you can get an abatement on the Community Preservation Act. So
I'm glad you
there are
mentioned those things,
there are a
right.
number of things that are in place for people for whom this might be a challenge.
Right, and I think for
and
some
I really
of the
encourage
seniors,
people to look into those options.
for the seniors
because-
that he's talking about, I think that they would be more comfortable knowing that they had adequate support via ambulance or so. I know my
Absolutely.
mom passed away last year, and the ambulance was at our house several times, and she was very thankful that it brought a lot of comfort to her. And I think it was the one thing when we talked about, the cost of living here in Lexington, it was one of the things that she was very comfortable with. And again, I'm editorializing when I shouldn't, but I wanted to get that in. So it's time. You're saying basically it's time to do this. This facility is finally at the point where we really can't kick the can down the road anymore. We have to deal with it.
Yes.
And I agree.
Yes.
Okay.
I agree.
All right. Great.
What I'm saying, though, is I think it's fair to note that even though these programs do exist, and I'm glad they exist, I hope you will agree with me that there are elderly people and people on limited incomes who are leaving the town because the tax burden is too high, notwithstanding all these great programs.
There are actually many fewer people that take advantage of the programs than
That's
could.
my point. That's my point. Yeah,
So
but
they
I think
should
maybe
look into them.
we have a better we have a responsibility to do a better job at publicizing these different opportunities.
Yes, and I hope that people will take this as a message to do that.
And as a publisher, you know what, I think I will, and I'll get people out there, and hopefully I'll get the word out there about these opportunities.
Great.
So we've actually gone nearly an hour, so I'm getting the high sign that we need to sort of wrap it up. So I could do this for another hour, and I'm sure you guys could too, and this hour went by very quickly.
How do you know? You're guessing.
But
right.
I'm glad we had a chance to sort of get into the weeds a little bit and then get sort of an expository discussion about, and it's very clear that you guys are both very, very passionate about this. What I am surprised is that you're both Bernie Sanders voters. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing. So let me start over here, Patrick. Just in a minute or so, be concise if you can, because we really do have to close this out. Give me your elevator pitch. Why, if I'm the guy on the street and I'm not sure how to vote on this, tell me why I should vote no.
You should vote no because the projects can be done and will be done without a 3% tax increase if the town finally sits down and saves the money that can be saved in the 3 areas that are specified on lexvote.org. And I invite the viewers to go to the website. It's again lexvote.org, and they can look at all the numbers. And they're certainly not perfect because, not all the information is available. But the fact is, notwithstanding what the Yes campaign writes in the Minuteman and elsewhere, these proposals have never been seriously considered. And I remain at the disposal of any town official, elected or staff, who will call me to work at no fee to the town and figure things out to the bottom of them. But there's too much money involved here, such as the subsidies that we now, taxpayers in Lexington, give to the IBMs of the world via this very high 85% contribution to health premiums of our employees, that have to be looked into, and they haven't. And that is simply not acceptable. And the bottom line is it chases people of limited means the elderly out of our town, and we become a less and less economically diverse town, which is not what a Bernie Sanders voter wants to see.
Okay.
All
Nicola.
right. So I would really like to make the point that we cannot fund these projects on hypotheticals. So if people want these projects if people want to pay for these projects, we have to vote for the debt exclusion. You have to vote yes for all 3 projects. And we didn't really get a chance to go into the concerns about the preschool. The idea that the Pelham could be used for 7th Elementary School has been studied, and it's not big enough to have both an elementary school and parking and play space. So there are other locations that are being considered for a 7th Elementary School. I would really like to strongly encourage people to think about the amount of time and energy that our elected officials and volunteers have spent studying all of the different options for the preschool, for increasing capacity. I mean, it's for the funding. It's all been really well thought through. I've met so many of the people who are involved in this. They're all very thoughtful, intelligent people. And I mean, literally thousands of hours have been spent on this. And I think it should be, I hope that it's clear to people that any potential savings are just that. And we can't pay for these buildings on potential savings. And I really would strongly encourage people to look into the needs for the preschool, particularly because I know that that's the project that sort of that there have been the most questions raised about. And I just like to read a quick quote from a parent who's had a child attend the preschool. So for our oldest, who has multiple disabilities, public preschool has allowed her to attend school in her home community with her peers and learn how to walk independently and communicate. We also decided to enroll our son, who is typically developing, at Lexington Children's Place, so he had the opportunity to learn alongside children of all abilities. The lessons of compassion, empathy, acceptance, and kindness he has gained are invaluable and naturally flow from the educational model that LCP embraces. Please vote yes on December 4th.
Okay.
So.
Well, great, and it's compelling. I think you both have made some compelling statements. I know, as I acknowledged, we could go on longer. There are a lot more questions. People have asked me, actually prepping for this, somebody said, why can't they make a better use of the old Harrington School? And I think you might have mentioned, the fact that the reason there were around students there is because it was substandard. But there are a lot more questions that can be answered on both websites. The Committee for Financial Responsibility in Lexington, and it's lexvote.org. The Yes for Lexington campaign, and that website is?
Yes for Lex, YES4LEX.org.
Okay, so I go ahead.
I'd also like to mention we have a number of information sessions coming up. We will be speaking at the Cal information session tomorrow. There will be information sessions in the week before the vote. So I really encourage people to take the time to learn more about these issues, attend the information sessions, speak with the people that have been working on these projects for years and years, and please vote yes on Monday, December 4th.
Well, Nicola, Patrick, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim.
It's been enjoyable, educational.
And I guess we'll be back in 18 months.
So, and I want to just say thank you to the folks here at LexMedia for helping us put this on, and the great staff here that's always working so hard to bring us this programming. The Colonial Times is always pleased to partner up with LexMedia whenever we have a chance to bring information to the voters. So again, thank you both. And people at home, remember December 4th, get out and vote. Get educated, then vote. Thank you.